Two things people used to have a hard time thinking about are the numbers 0 and triangles. It is progress that people accept the way that nothing can be the value of a number. In Asia, many believed nothingness was where everything we see, feel, and hear came from, which is different from the simplicity of the number 0. As for triangles, the idea of what a triangle is took a long time for people to have as their own idea in their minds. It was easy to accept that 3 pieces of wood connected at the ends was made into what people call a triangle. But the idea of the triangle is perfect as an idea in itself, and it does not need the sticks of wood to exist. In what way nature's triangles truly exist makes the question too complicated. But you could get a real splinter from a piece of wood. A true triangle would never hurt you in that way because it exists as a perfect idea. Nothing is exactly how many people think about the air all around them. When people think about the air as something, they often think about the air as one thing, as if air was as simple as its 3-letter word. To start our story of science somewhere noteworthy for the imagination of young Americans, we begin with Benjamin Franklin signing the Declaration of Independence in 1776. In the history of engineering and math, this is not long ago. As a modern man of his time, Ben Franklin wrote, published books, and enjoyed doing science and math. Speaking French, he would visit great scientists in Paris. Also back then, educated men spoke Latin, the language of ancient Rome, allowing people from Italy and Germany to use the same words as fellow scientists in England, Scotland, France, and Russia. Ben Franklin was a master of using words, and he was friends with some of the greatest scientists of his lifetime. The way Ben and his friends saw their world was not the way that we see our world today. The way Ben's social world saw him was also special. His friends and people he wrote letters to formed a smaller group, all their own. You might say he was on a few teams, such as the Founding Fathers, who began the United States of America. He also had a friend, Joseph Priestley, who studied air really well, and another friend, the French scientist Antoine Lavoisier. One conversation between Priestley and Lavoisier became famous for how just a little information helped the French scientist find new answers to important questions. Lavoisier used his own money to make special labs for science with superfine scales and special containers to do experiments in. Young people are famous for asking questions. If you want to grow up into a scientist, you should never stop. These men were doing science, and today, people from every background, all around the world, do science too. You can join them. When someone who knows how to ask questions learns a big answer, and it is really true, many more questions can grow out of it. Little answers, like Priestley and Lavoisier discussing air, and little changes to ways a question can be asked add up. The history of science these men played their important parts in happened because of many people sharing. They shared questions, and they shared answers. They put on shows to explain what they believed. Becoming famous was less rewarding than the lives scientists like Ben Franklin lived, sharing their ideas and beliefs. Looking back to the beginning of the 1700s, Ben Franklin's crowd saw two giants, Isaac Newton from England and Gottfried Leibniz from Germany. In an age that seemed filled with new beginnings, these two men seemed to have solved how planets move. They both thought up new math to know how fast something is moving. If you could take a moment so fast that the thing was not moving at all. The world felt smarter for what these men figured out, published, and defended in letters, standing up for their ideas. By the time of Ben Franklin, later that century, men learned about air using containers like jars for their experiments. They learned that plants get something else out of the air, different from what we take out of it when we breathe. Plants need what they need, and we need something Lavoisier called oxygen. That name he gave it means things he was wrong about. All these men were wrong about some things. Lavoisier's wife worked closely with him, smart and skilled, helping France and the world know things no one knew before. But scientists back then were also wrong, a lot, as grown-ups often are. In life, doing one's best means using what one knows at the time. It is a happy story, the way teams of scientists have helped each other learn from mistakes, making new answers and new questions, too. Remember that words made all this possible, and Benjamin Franklin was a master of words. He wrote letters. He made books people would take around the world. His words made friends for him. People would argue and believed in different things, but scientists did not fight each other. Sometimes countries like France, England, and Germany did fight. But scientists, with their friendships and sharing, were called to a different contest, as if everyone was building something grand, and their goal was to add a piece of their own everyone agreed was great. There have been a lot of those in the history of science. For all the famous men, there were many more men we do not know, as well as women who worked, helped, and did science, but did not have their names credited on it because society was unfair. In 1752, Franklin's famous kite experiment confirmed that electricity was in the air around a storm, up high as the kite could travel. In Italy, in the year 1780, Luigi Galvani and his scientist wife Lucia confirmed that electricity is part of how bodies of animals and people cause muscles to twitch. Every time you bend, small electric signals travel as a message to your muscles. When we move, our bodies use electricity that is inside of us as part of how we are made. People living back in Franklin's time had no idea electricity was everywhere, like in lightning and in each twitch of our fingers. They did not know that magnetism was always along for the ride too. What people have since learned about electricity and magnets has changed the world's machines, so cars and buildings now use electricity all the time. In the space station, up above our Earth's surface, much higher than Franklin's kite, the people working and living up there can see our lights at nighttime. Our lights are bright because scientists learned to use electricity, nature's same electricity that Franklin learned more about with his kite.